This is the first time that International Climate Change Conference, COP, will take place in Africa. The deal they do here is important. We heard many rumors that some of the powerful countries don't want to continue with Kyoto. The conference will take place at the International Conference Center, the ICC. If they come up with a compromise, the effects on Africa will be devastating. They will cook Africa. This is why several thousand activists from all over the world have come to the People's Base at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. It is 7 kilometers from the ICC where decisions are being made. But it's a space where we can have our meetings and organize ourselves. We would rather be near to the ICC, but it's the best we could get. And we are trying to get our views heard. I felt that I need to be part of the space that civil society has created here at the university and share my experience and my struggles with other comrades from other parts of the world. Because my struggle is not, we are not going to win our struggle while we are not in solidarity with other struggles around the world.
Why? Africa is yesterday we learned that the government of Canada...
I grew up, I think, around protest, in townships, especially around service delivery issue. If you don't protest, then your voices will always be driven away by the politicians. So it's always to go out, mobilize your people, be where people are, raise your voices as loud as you can. And I think protesting is, for me, it's my tool that I can use to send my message across. Because, for instance, if we don't protest, those guys at ICC won't feel that we are demanding something important.
With all the difficulties of the UN negotiating system, it is the only option that we have to ensure that we can get a globally agreed, fair, ambitious and legal climate treaty. We need to now be asking the question why in fact Copenhagen failed and why these negotiations have been dragging on, and ask the question who is holding us back. It is very clear that there are two problems. One is the disproportionate level of influence that polluting corporations have on the negotiating process. But on the other hand, it's also the lack of courage and principle on the part of various dominant governments in the world who are not willing to listen to the voices of their people in the same way they listen to the voices of the corporations.
The demand that is coming out of this conference is for world leaders to come up with a climate deal. Let's have a Durban deal that will save the planet, especially the rural women. When you look at how women around the world have taken food security issues, water issues, energy issues, they are at the forefront and are the ones who are suffering most when it comes to climate change.
But today we are also joined in a struggle that is perhaps one of the most important struggles of our lives, because it not only threatens our land, our water, our resources, our livelihoods, our food, it threatens the lives of our people, of hundreds of millions of people across the world.
But I think before Friday we need to raise our voices again, especially this week that the ministers are high levels, ministers are arriving and the heads of state are arriving. We need to be at ICC. It's where we need to be, not here at the university anymore. I think we need to go there, have camps outside the ICC, have action there, so that the world leaders can listen, can come up with a deal that will save the planet.
Why should we speak while we must enter the space?
On Friday the 2nd, we had to organize our group to join the Rural Women Assembly March at Brown Fisher Road from the Speaker's Corner. What was exciting there is that there were about 200 women inside the Speaker's Corner. We came with about 5 buses. When we entered the speaker's corner, the police stopped us there and said that they cannot allow us to enter the space because there are already 200 people and they are only allowed to have 100 people in the space.
It was quite interesting. We just broke the police chain there, wanting to stop us to join the women in the rural women on the march. So we just won it. We just won it now. And we're going to say to them, no!
We need a lot of more rural areas to have centers where they can teach farmers how to adapt to the season, how to adapt to the changing weather, how to plant new seeds, and to understand the nutrition that these seeds will bring.
That was a very, very powerful march. At the first week of the conference, the spirit that was shown by women, it was fantastic. And I think they led from the front. Activists at the People's Space are educating themselves on climate change and finding solutions we can mobilize together for, like the 1 Million Climate Jobs campaign. This is a demand for governments across the world to invest in renewable energy and create much needed jobs at the same time.
Thank you. Again, this is...
The first thing we learned that's important to climate change is that for 10 years, the governments have been telling us the market will be the answer to climate change. Market mechanisms will solve this problem. When the banks and the stock exchanges and the hedge funds got in trouble in 2008, they didn't ask for the market, they screamed for government intervention. That's what the market wants when they're in trouble, and that's what we need for the planet. We need massive government intervention. The second thing we learned is that the money is there. We learned in 2008 that if a bank is in trouble, the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States can find $400 billion on a Tuesday by 12 o'clock lunchtime to save the bank. If Mother Earth was a bank, they would already have saved it.
Thinking about it, trying to look at what's happened in the world so far and how capitalism works, I think abrupt climate change, very fast climate change, it will do 3 things that are key. One is it will create famine. The rains will fail in various parts of the world, and that will increase the price of food. But in the areas where the rains fail, some people will starve to death. Quite a lot of people. Second thing it will do is create enormous numbers of refugees. And those refugees will come up against borders and with men and women with machine guns. And the refugee camps will stretch for miles and last for years. And on the other side of that border, you will have an enormous rise in racism to justify keeping those people out. Third thing is war. Change the balance of geographical power and economic power, and the big powers and the small powers will go to war to restore that balance. It will be hundreds of millions dead.
When you look at the Vaal River water system, the water is getting less and less within the Vaal water river systems. And we know that it's supplying plus minus 10.9 million people of Johannesburg with drinking water. And if the entire Vaal River water system get dried up, it means the people in Johannesburg will end up with no drinking water. So if we as a country don't deal with the issue of climate change now, In the next 50 years, in this country, we'll be having no access to drinking water. This is the big day we've been waiting for. All over the world, people are asking for a good deal in Durban for climate justice.
You cannot commit genocide and ecocide. A bad deal in Durban means that more than 350,000 persons are going to keep dying because of natural disasters. And what they are negotiating is a new mandate to do nothing until the year 2020. We want deep cuts of emissions now. We need to save the people now.
It's great to be on the streets with this many people. I thought I wouldn't see it.
But I was excited about the march on Saturday. It was the biggest, I think, march out of the COP that I have ever seen, especially that is in Africa, after Nairobi. And I think the unity of a movement that we're trying to build from below, it shows here in the streets of Durban. And we're hoping that comes Friday the 9th, the world leaders will come up with something that will save the planet.
My mother was a kitchen girl. My father was a garden boy. That's why I'm a socialist. I'm a socialist. I'm a socialist. My mother was a kitchen girl. My father was a garden boy. That's why I'm a farmer now. I'm a farmer now.
On the march, a memorandum was given to the president of COP17, stating people's demands on emission cuts and a climate deal.
Majority of the delegates here are saying second commitment period now, and that should also look at elements of the legal form of the future framework. So whatever we do, we will do also informed by this petition that covers the voices of this very important component of the COP under the C17. I thank you very much once again.
I can do the best in my country. I can reduce my emissions. But if the richest countries don't do the same, it's over for all of us. So the only way that it can work is if all the states, and especially the biggest countries, the big polluters, agree to do this.
But more importantly, we want people to honor what they have undertaken to do in all these agreements, which are legal.
In Copenhagen, I would say the key issue was raised by many social movements. And it was phrased in the slogan, change the system, not the climate. This issue has to do with the capitalist system. If we are not able to change the capitalist system, we are not going to be able to solve the issue of climate change.
The whole system itself, the capitalist system, the logic itself is what has led to excessive greenhouse gas emissions, to the unrelenting extraction of natural resources that has destroyed also the Earth's capacity to absorb greenhouse gases. So we don't think that solving the climate crisis can be separate from addressing the challenge of transforming the system.
How do we change this? How are we going to be able to have a negotiation that doesn't think on the interest of the 1% of the population, but thinks on the interests of the 99% of the population? If we manage to bring together these movements of Occupy Wall Street, Indignados, the climate justice movement, we are going to be able to change not only the course of these negotiations, but of the society.
The rich countries are 1/4 of the world and are responsible for 3/4 of the emissions. And they know that. I don't think it's because they don't know that. They just simply, on the one hand, ignore it because they benefit from this system. But I think the worst is they think they're entitled.
So the key issue behind all of this is the capitalist system and how we are able, as movements around the world, to confront and change and develop an alternative to that.
La Via Campesina is an organization 2 million strong. It's represented in over 70 countries. They are at COP because they know that large-scale agriculture is a big part of the problem of global warming. The small-scale agriculture that they practice helps to cool the planet down.
Estamos exigiendo que los países industrializados cumplan con esa deuda histórica que tienen para con los países pobres y para con la humanidad. Estamos pensando que COP17 es un caos, no va a servir, no va a tener acuerdos mientras lo que tengan en la mesa de negociaciones sea cómo las grandes corporaciones hacen negocios y sacan más ganancias. Eso no es.
And the demand out of these Durban marches is that world leaders must come up with a Durban deal. Kyoto must be saved so that all countries that have historical emissions can pay, especially the issue of ecological debt. It's also coming up very, very strong in this conference to say the North have polluted the space and they have to pay the developing world.
We want it to be a fund which can really help us deal with climate change phenomenon. We want that fund to be a fund which is accessible, where there's a certain dimension of country ownership, where people, once again, are not trying to make our happiness without us by telling us what we need, but really where countries can say, well, this project can receive the green light from a designated national authority because the project is in line with national programs, projects, and policies.
We are going to need very large sums of money to help the poor countries in the world to do the work that needs to be done and to take care of the people who are the victims of climate change. It's very large sums of money in terms of what those people need to be paid. They're very small sums of money in terms of what the 1% own in the United States or Germany or Britain. We will have to share the expense of solving this problem globally.
They are offering to mobilize $100 billion by the year 2020. But they are spending now $1.5 trillion in military budget, defense budget, security budget. So there is no relation between the amount of money that is going to produce warm and security intelligence and so on than the money that's going to fight climate change.
I think we're at the stage where we need whatever is necessary, and I think a big part of that is in aid. Even though people will be like, oh, Africa is relying on aid as usual, but I think that's the stage where we've gotten to.
African countries have formed a bloc that is against any compromise on legally binding targets. But the European Union countries are pushing for a compromise where individual nations can set their own emission targets. Many polluting countries, such as the US, would rather see pledge and review than the legally binding targets.
Are you prepared to accept the pledge and review process under certain conditions?
I don't think the pledge and review is really a good thing. Going into the pledge and review world is a bottom-up approach where you decide what you're going to contribute to the dam and hope that by a miracle the dam will be sufficiently high and sufficiently strong to resist the pressure. And that will not happen because we're going to build a dam which will be half of what it needs to be, and it will collapse under the pressure. So we believe that the most ambitious framework is the one which is the top-down approach, which is the one of the Kyoto Protocol.
I would say that the key player here is Africa and the African group. And of course the presidency, South Africa, because they are the host country. If they defend the future of Africa, they cannot accept an agreement that will mean more than 4 or 6 degrees Celsius of increase in the temperature. So what Africa is going to do is key. But the pressure to governments in developing countries in Africa comes especially from rich countries. When they say, if you don't accept this, we are going to cut you this aid. In the case of Bolivia, when we opposed the Copenhagen Accord and we objected, a few weeks later, the US cut the aid for climate change, $3 million. They also cut the aid to Ecuador, $2.5 million. So there is a concrete pressure. If you don't accept this, we are going to punish you. These pressures are taking place. Otherwise, you cannot understand why delegations that know the consequences of what they are approving, they will approve it at the end.
Rumors coming from inside the ICC tell us that South Africa is going to break away from the African bloc and agree to a deal that could mean no action until 2020. Then unexpectedly, President Zuma called civil society to a meeting at City Hall. This is our chance to appeal to our government to stand firm and not to sell out.
You know, I've been in places in the world where people come and break shops and loot in the name of protesting. And I don't agree with it. It doesn't help anyone. I think it's very important. You have a view, even if you disagree, respect the other view. Because if you think your view is the only correct one, and is the one that must prevail at all costs, that's a problem.
Please, let's have some order.
It was incredible. We thought that we were being consulted, but when we peacefully gave our opinion, we were then met by force.
Because we're upstairs, we could go down and take the mics. So the only way was to put those banners on top where we're sitting to send the message to the president. What is our position? The another thing that we're grabbed there by the security forces and these so-called volunteers, and then we're thrown out of the meeting there.
It's clear that South Africa is going to break ranks and it's going to betray us. We'll see it in the final text, and that's going to be the evidence.
I was excited to be part of the COP here in Durban. I'm still hopeful that maybe something may get out, but I'm doubting if we'll get any binding agreement, especially the way Canada, US are behaving currently in the negotiations there.
It's not looking good. It's not surprising that it's not looking good, because the forces that want to keep the world as it is far stronger than us at the moment.
My hope for COP17, I have one. And it's that a voice comes out of Durban that the world can hear that says, no, this is not good enough. Something must be done. Action must be taken. Because what the world's media are saying now is true, that the governments of the world have decided that no action now will be taken about climate change before 2020, they say. They mean never.
The possibility that a delegation stands and says, we don't accept a bad deal, it's a possibility. It happened in Copenhagen. 6, 7 delegations said, we don't accept this. In Cancun, we as Bolivia said, we don't accept this. Here in South Africa, the possibility that many African delegations will stand up is a reality.
I think without citizens taking it up, we're not going to get anywhere. It's up to us to make sure that we raise our voices so that the leaders knows that we demand change, and we demand it now.
You're making the most important decisions affecting humanity. Don't let them kill us on the inside. Don't let them kill us on the inside.
Time is run out for negotiations. We got to the ICC and fled the delegates directly.
Tell them on the inside, tell them on the inside, tell them on the inside. Tell them.
These people are not good. The government is paying us.
Things get heated when the activists begin to realize that the deal they are cooking up in Durban involved doing nothing until 2020. The hope is, if you are loud enough, we can still influence a few delegates to walk out and refuse to sign a bad deal.
We would like to see this process become a real people's process. We would like to see this process become a real people's process. That is why we are staying here. We are staying here. Refuse to leave. Refuse to leave.
The choices really are a bad deal or no deal. And for us, a no deal is better than a bad deal. So the failure is because there will not be a good deal that will come out of Durban, the deal that the world needs. But the fight is still going on.
When they eventually announced the Durban deal, it is hailed by the press as a victory. In fact, it's a huge betrayal. Africa has been betrayed.
A few moments ago, we found out the decisions that they have been cooking behind the scenes. In Durban, they won't approve a second period of commitments for the Kyoto Protocol. This will happen at the end of next year in COP18. In Durban, they will only take note of the draft amendments and the intention of rich countries to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The Kyoto Protocol will lose its heart. The promise of reductions by rich countries will be incredibly low until 2020 and will lead to a temperature increase of more than 4 degrees Celsius.
And as the planet heats up, it's going to be worse for Africa. This continent is heating up faster than other parts of the world. That is why we so desperately need the polluting countries to reduce their emissions. The Durban deal is a disaster for us. We can't wait 9 years for the binding agreements to be put in place. But the rulers of the world have decided they don't care about Africa.
I am more optimistic now than in Copenhagen. Why? Because I see new movements in the world. The indignados in Europe, what we are seeing in Arab countries, the emerging of the young people, the Occupy Wall Street in North America. In 1 year, I would say that we have never seen such huge mobilizations around the world.
Going back to the VAL, one of the biggest challenges is to make sure that we mobilize more. As much as people are aware of climate change, issue of education, it will be very, very key for us, and mobilize other forces within our ranks.
Deep change we have to do is that we have to come together as the 99% of humanity. We have to come together to change something really important. We have never done that. If we do that, we will change the nature of what the world is like.
How do we shape the South African politics for the next 10, 15 years? And you see young people here very, very committed to that cause. And that's why I'm excited that in the next couple of years, social movement in South Africa will take over their right position.